The Politics of Frustration in the 1920s. The Losers, Part 2. Sacco and Vanzetti, the trial of the century as it was called at the time. Remember, we're talking in terms of reaction and rebellion. What was changing in America that forced the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant majority to react to re-establish their values? We know that the consequences of World War I were economic and were social, and consequently also political, with the elections of Harding and the Republican Party on a platform of taking America back to more normal times, normalcy. Therefore, as it says here, public distrust of radicals, and especially foreigners suspected of holding revolutionary political beliefs, reached its peak with the trial of Nicholas Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti, two self-confessed anarchists who were arrested in 1920 for robbery and for murder. The two men were immigrants from Italy who had lived in the US for many years by the time of the trial. The trial, which began in July of 1921, was a travesty of justice. Many Americans felt that the prosecution had railroaded the two into, not because they were guilty of the charges brought against them, but because they were immigrants and self-proclaimed radicals. And this is a time of cultural fundamentalism. To be a self-professed anarchist and communist at this time was not the right thing to be. Public opinion was divided. Some Americans felt that anyone professing a belief in radicalism was already guilty and therefore should be hung. Others believed that the true test of a democracy was its ability to protect the rights of those who express unpopular opinions. But of course the latter view would have been liberal, a tolerant attitude which did not fit with the rise of and resurgence of conservative America. Because of protests at home and abroad, the appeal process had continued for 6 years. Finally, in 1927, the governor of Massachusetts appointed an advisory committee to review the case. The committee charged the original presiding judge of a grave breach of official decorum, but maintained that Sacco and Vanzetti were guilty as charged. In his final statement on April the 7th, 1927, Vanzetti claimed that the trial had not been about murder, but rather his ideology and his ethnic heritage. His ideology did not fit. His ethnic heritage did not fit. Sacco and Vanzetti represent the failure of the melting pot and the reaction of the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants against the rebellion of change that had brought them to America. I am suffering because I am a radical. Indeed, I am a radical. I have suffered because I was an Italian. Indeed, I am an Italian. I have suffered more for my family and my beloved than for myself. But I am also so convinced to be right that if you could execute me 2 times, and if I could be reborn 2 other times, I would live again to do what I have already done. I have finished. Thank you. On August the 23rd, 1927, the state executed Sacco and Vanzetti for their alleged crimes. The trial revealed the shameful side of cultural fundamentalism and left many American intellectuals disillusioned with their government and the nation's justice system. Now please remember, American intellectualism was for many stifled during the 1920s, and we've seen that reflected in the lost generation of American authors who left America finding it too stifling, too conservative. This disillusionment pushed many of them away from liberalism to more radical political beliefs in the 1930s. Consequently, part of the reaction of the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants would manifest themselves in the rise of political extremism. In this case, the rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan, the KKK. Now, it first emerged during the Reconstruction after the American Civil War in the mid-19th century. In 1915, Colonel William Joseph Simmons revived the organization. The Klan received a charter of incorporation from the Georgia state legislature, but it remained little more than a small regional organization until 1920. But of course 1920 is significant as it falls within this period of dislocation, the economic and social consequences of the end of World War I and the consequent political upheavals that arise from it. In the spring of 1920, two New York conmen, hoping to capitalize on membership fees that the Klan charged, started the Southern Publicity Association to promote the Klan's views. In the autumn of 1921, some members of the House of Representatives began to investigate this new phenomenon. As often happens, the House investigation provided the Klan with free publicity, and its membership grew from 100,000 to 1 million in 1922. By 1925, due-paying members registered around 2 million members. Now, again, this is interesting in terms of the rise of the Klan, as what it illustrates is that when government get involved and the media get involved, for the first time in American history, small events can become remarkably big. Sacco and Vanzetti proved that a murder in Massachusetts could become not just a statewide, but a national and international media event. The Klan was built upon genuine economic and social misfortunes experienced in the South, which never benefited from the growth of the prosperity of America in the 1920s. But it was fueled by the media that was triggered by the investigation. The poster itself illustrates the broad church that the Klan represented. Yep, not just being this racist, aggressive group, but representing a much bigger social phenomenon in the 1920s. Remembering, what we're talking about here is the Klan initially finding its roots in areas where the economic growth of the 1920s had simply missed people by. The Klan then promoted what it called 100% Americanism, and that consisted of the following characteristics: Protestantism, charity, motherhood, morality, temperance, anti-alcohol, and the value of education. But behind each of these are a very strict moral code, rooted in a Protestant interpretation of the Bible. Traditional roles for mothers, traditional Victorian morality, traditional dry views and attitudes towards alcohol, and of course the role of the church and the role of religion within education. So if this is what Americanism is, it's certainly white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Americanism. Therefore, what is not 100%? While officially denying all hatreds, the Klan's qualifications for membership embraced all hatreds and prejudices. Their main targets were Roman Catholics. The Klan members called the Pope a political autocrat. He was the Antichrist, intent on taking over the world. They insisted it was impossible for anyone to be a good American and a good Catholic at the same time. Somewhat similar attitudes to those that Hitler held towards the Catholic Church. Jews and anti-Semitism. Klan members denounced the Jews as internationalists who could never form the deep attachments to America that came naturally to the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant majority, long established over generations. African Americans. Yep, the Klan was militantly anti-black, and according to the imperial wizard Hiram Wesley Evans, every instinct, every interest, every dictate of conscience and public spirit insists that white supremacy shall forever be maintained. Despite popular perceptions, the Klan was not limited to the Deep South. The Klan would make inroads wherever the boom had failed to improve people's lives in the 1920s. Revolutionaries and extremists, as we know from GCSE, thrive on evil times. The rise of the Klan is clear in evidence that the good times that America so cleverly promoted to the rest of the world were not experienced by every American. In fact, the Klan enjoyed its greatest public support in Indiana, in Texas and Ohio. The Texas in the south, but Indiana in the Midwest, and Ohio in the north. Klan members were elected to the city councils of diverse places such as Chicago, Indianapolis, Denver, and Dallas. The Klan also captured 6 governorships, including those of Oregon, Indiana, and Colorado. And although the Klan never won the presidency, they did manage to split the 1924 Democratic Convention. Though, as we've already studied, people voting with their wallets, the Republicans were always going to be in the driving seat throughout the 1920s until the crash of 1929. From 1925 on, rates of membership to the Klan fell and the influence of the Klan declined. For one, the leaders had promised far more than they could actually deliver. Second, they lacked a systematic program of action for their goals of restoring the Bible to its place in public schools and returning African Americans to rural docility. Yet the Klan's ultimate weakness was its reliance on passion rather than reason. The Klan would regain strength in the mid-30s and again after World War II, in the Depression, and also again in that dislocation after the end of World War II. The rise of the new Klan in the 20s and after demonstrated how palpable American sphere of outsiders remained. This concept of xenophobia, of anyone who was not one of them, was an outsider, an alien. It is the reaction of the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, especially the economically disadvantaged rural, agricultural, agrarian white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, against outsiders, against change. The Scopes trial. On the surface, the Scopes trial, known as the monkey trial, was about academic freedom. In actuality, it pitted 2 opposing views of society. On one side stood modern, urban, intellectually rational and secular America, modern America, cosmopolitan America, the America of the East Coast and the West Coast, the America that had been susceptible to the great waves of immigration and change that had come through the world in the 1920s. On the other side stood religious dogma and conservative rural values, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant America. By the 1920s, universities, schools around the nation taught Darwin's theory. The Tennessee legislature, however, passed a law prohibiting public school instructors from teaching any theory that conflicted with the Bible story of creation. John T. Scopes, a 25-year-old teacher in Dayton, Tennessee, challenged the law by teaching evolution in his high school biology class. He never shied away from what he was doing. In fact, he had been encouraged to do it to test this new law that the Tennessee legislature had. As a result, he was arrested for violating the state laws, and of that he was indeed guilty. At the trial, however, Clarence Darrow, one of the nation's leading lawyers, and a team financed by the American Civil Liberties Union, defended Scopes. The prosecuting attorney was William Jennings Bryan, the former populist presidential candidate and Secretary of State, who had become leader of fundamentalist movements in America. This was modern America against traditional America. This was the forces of rebellion and change against the reaction, the entrenchment of the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant America. The Scopes monkey trial was a red line, a thin red line in the sand that was going to be fought and defended. Religious fundamentalists like Bryan were some of the most vocal proponents of cultural fundamentalism during the 1920s. This growing movement in Protestant Christianity took its name from a series of pamphlets entitled The Fundamentals, a testament of truth, published by Milton and Lyman Stewart of Union Oil in California between 1909 and 1912. The pamphlets outlined the following principles: the virgin birth, the physical resurrection, the imminent second coming of Christ, and a literal interpretation of the Bible. As it says here, from the creation of Eve out of Adam to the visions in Revelations, there are no allegories in the Bible and no subjects open to interpretation. That is what was on trial at the Scopes. That is the subtext. Throughout the trial, Scopes is guilty. He has broken the law. But what we will see once again, the rise of the media turns a minor event into the trial of the century, another trial of the century. The Fundamentalist movement was strongest in the South, where Tennessee was, but had a significant presence in the Midwest and West. One of the most popular preachers of this period was Billy Sunday, who hit the gospel circuit with all the subtlety of a runaway train. There is nothing we can say that can even come close. The Christian fundamentalist Bryan faced off against the agnostic, the non-believing Darrow. The judge did not allow any expert scientific testimony about evolution for the defence, so Darrow's chief witness turned out to be Bryan himself. In the end, Darrow humiliated Bryan when he got him to state under oath that a big fish had swallowed Jonah, and that God had literally created women from a piece of Adam's rib, and that God had flooded the world and killed every creature on earth except for the fish in the ocean and for the animals on Noah's Ark in 2348 BC. In the years following World War I, social and cultural conflicts shaped American society. Some of the most fiscally conservative presidents in American history governed a nation that more than a few Americans believed was being taken over by radical anarchists and socialists. As a greater number of African Americans left their rural southern roots and settled in industrial cities, the Klan became a major force in American politics. The advances of science made institutionalized religion less tenable for many Americans and introduced new technologies to daily life. Growing numbers of Americans, however, feared the loss of religious morality and the simplicity of life without machines, and rejected science and its modernist implications.